When her husband perished in a tragic plane crash, Maureen O'Hara was crushed, drowning in grief. But her sorrow soon turned into obsession, an investigation into the accident that led her to a revelation so chilling, she kept it buried for 25 years. With her vibrant red hair and piercing green eyes, Maureen seemed destined for stardom in old Hollywood. The screen adored her, the queen of Technicolor, a living jewel. Yet behind the glamour, shadows lingered. Secret marriages, bitter on-set rivalries, and hidden dangers dogged her every step. Born Maureen Fitzsimmons in 1920s Dublin, one of 6 children, Maureen's life seemed ordinary. Until a strange visitor arrived when she was just 5, a woman who claimed she could see the future. That encounter, fleeting as it was, hinted at a destiny that would be as fiery and unforgettable as Maureen herself. When she was just a little girl, Maureen received an eerie prediction from that mysterious visitor. "One day, you will leave Ireland and become a woman famous all around the world. But one day, it will all slip through your fingers." Those words stayed with her, haunting her thoughts. At 14, O'Hara joined Dublin's Abbey Theatre, taking on small stage roles. After 3 years of relentless work, she finally earned her first leading part. But just as her excitement peaked, a life-changing opportunity made her pause. An American entertainer named Harry Richmond was convinced that Maureen should leave the stage and try her luck in film, and he arranged a screen test for her. The test at L Street Studios in London turned out to be a disaster. The makeup artists dressed her in a gaudy gold gown, plastered her face with heavy makeup, and twisted her hair into an elaborate style. Maureen looked twice her age, miserable and insecure, convinced she had made a mistake leaving the Abbey Theatre behind. Yet, luckily, at least one person saw past the garish facade. English actor Charles Hilton watched her screen test and was so impressed that he immediately offered her a valuable contract, opening the door to the film world she had always dreamed of. But success came at a price for O'Hara. Lynn insisted she change her last name, and just like that, Maureen O'Hara was born. Her big break came during the filming of Alfred Hitchcock's Jamaica Inn, but her heart was caught in another drama. On set, she started dating English producer George H. Brown. He fell madly in love, but Maureen felt more reserved. When she told Brown she had to leave for Hollywood to shoot The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he begged her for one last meeting. Against her better judgment, she agreed, only to discover that Brown had an audacious plan, a surprise wedding. Shocked and only 19 years old, O'Hara went through with the ceremony, stunned by how quickly her life had shifted. Once in Hollywood, her new husband turned their union into a full-blown PR nightmare. He proudly announced to the press that he had married Ireland's most famous young starlet. Furious at the unexpected revelation, O'Hara's studio bosses demanded action. Already desperate to escape her hasty nuptials, Maureen complied without hesitation. While Brown waited in Ireland for his bride's return, O'Hara stayed in the U.S., quietly annulling the marriage. From that day on, she never saw George H. Brown again. Before The Hunchback of Notre Dame even hit theaters, the press was buzzing with anticipation over Maureen O'Hara's Hollywood debut. Yet she couldn't understand the hype, worried they might dismiss her as just a passing novelty, someone with no real staying power. She couldn't have been more wrong. O'Hara had only been a few years into her contract with Charles Hilton's film company when World War II erupted, bringing the world, and the movie industry, to a grinding halt. Hilton and O'Hara were supposed to return to London, but the man she had trusted betrayed her. In need of quick cash, Hilton coldly sold her contract to RKO Pictures, forcing her to remain in Hollywood, far from her family in Ireland. Heartbroken, O'Hara later recalled that Hilton's betrayal left her feeling utterly abandoned. Her first years in Hollywood were brutal. She appeared in films plagued by mediocre scripts, inexperienced directors, or both. Each setback chipped away at her hope, and she began to consider abandoning her contract and returning home. In a last attempt to change her fate, she turned to her agent with a desperate plea: secure her a role in famed director John Ford's next project, How Green Was My Valley. This, she hoped, might finally give her the breakthrough she had been longing for. She landed the part, but what seemed like a blessing soon revealed its curse. Maureen O'Hara and director John Ford became frequent collaborators, working on 5 films together over 2 decades. Yet behind the glamour and accolades lay a dark, unsettling side to their relationship. Ford was obsessed with O'Hara, and though she firmly rejected him, he seemed incapable of accepting her refusal. His behavior swung unpredictably between romantic fixation and outright cruelty. He wrote her long, drunken love letters, yet could also be violently abusive, even striking her on set. During those early, lonely days in Hollywood, another director, William Houston Price, offered her companionship. Unsurprisingly, he too fell for her. Once her annulment from her first husband was finalized, Price proposed, and the timid, isolated O'Hara accepted. Her lack of enthusiasm was evident. She didn't even inform her family until moments before the ceremony. But the surprises didn't end there. In the days following the wedding, O'Hara quickly discovered Price's dark and troubling side. He was a heavy drinker and an even greater liar. Though she knew she should have walked away, as a young actress with a carefully cultivated image to protect, O'Hara felt trapped, forced to endure a marriage that would haunt her. After World War II, Maureen O'Hara finally claimed her crown as the Queen of Technicolor. Her fiery red hair, striking green eyes, and porcelain skin made her the perfect star for Hollywood's new color films. Yet beneath the glamour, fame came with a cost. The harsh, blinding studio lights gave her severe headaches and even triggered a rare form of conjunctivitis, a painful reminder of the price of stardom. Despite the turmoil in her marriage to William Houston Price, O'Hara experienced a moment of pure joy in 1944 with the birth of her daughter, Bronwyn. And in 1947, her professional life reached a peak when she starred in the now-classic Christmas film Miracle on 34th Street. The movie not only cemented her place in Hollywood, but also allowed her to delight in working with the young Natalie Wood, who played her daughter, and the beloved Edmund Gwenn as Kris Kringle. On set, everything was magical. Off-screen, her life was far from it. At home, O'Hara struggled with an alcoholic husband, whose excessive drinking was compounded by reckless spending. Even as the world adored her, she faced daily battles behind closed doors, reminders that fame and fortune often come wrapped in unexpected suffering. William Houston Price's problems weren't limited to alcohol. He had a serious spending habit, too. He even hired a business manager who siphoned half of O'Hara's paychecks into a separate account just for himself. Their days fell into a grim, exhausting routine. Price would drink with his friends every night, and O'Hara would call an ambulance the next morning to haul him off to rehab when he passed out. By this point, O'Hara felt trapped. Her Catholic faith made her hesitant to file for divorce, and the toxic marriage seemed unending. Eventually, Price realized that if their miserable union were ever to end, he would have to make the first move. In 1951, on what would have been their 10th wedding anniversary, he filed for divorce and walked out of their family home. For O'Hara, a decade-long nightmare had finally ended. She took a restorative trip to Mexico and returned with an unexpected souvenir: a new lover, Enrique Parra, a wealthy politician and banker. Unlike previous men in her life, Parra had his own fortune and didn't need her money. Still, burned by past heartbreaks, O'Hara took no chances. She hired a private investigator to confirm that Parra had indeed separated from his wife. Meanwhile, professionally, the 1950s became O'Hara's golden era. She discovered her true niche in adventure films and westerns, particularly alongside John Wayne, carving out a legacy that would define her Hollywood career. On screen, Maureen O'Hara and John Wayne ignited sparks that had audiences wondering if their chemistry extended off camera. O'Hara insisted they were just close friends, but a recent biography of Wayne hinted otherwise. The book claims that Wayne and O'Hara shared a secret romance spanning nearly 20 years, beginning before his third marriage and continuing on and off until his death. According to a man who worked with them both, Wayne was genuinely in love with O'Hara, but he never proposed. He married only women he felt he could control, and he knew Maureen was too strong to bend. Meanwhile, O'Hara devoted herself to her relationship with Enrique Parra. Yet even this love was destined for heartbreak. When Parra's daughter died in 1967, his overwhelming grief drove a wedge between them. After more than 15 years together, their relationship ended, leaving O'Hara shattered and alone once more. Life, however, had another surprise in store. Back in 1946, during a flight to Ireland, she met Charles F. Blair Jr., the pilot who would unexpectedly capture her attention. It was an encounter that, like so many in O'Hara's life, would carry the promise of passion, adventure, and unforeseen twists, reminding her that even in heartbreak, life could deliver the most surprising turns. Over the years, Charles F. Blair Jr. had become friends with O'Hara's brothers. One night, when her brother had to cancel plans, he invited Maureen to go in his place. Both O'Hara and Blair were navigating recent breakups, and they leaned on each other for support. But one evening, Blair made a practical, if somewhat unromantic, proposal. He was retiring and wanted to marry her. Given her history with rushed proposals, her acceptance was surprising, but O'Hara was overjoyed. For once, the odds seemed to be in her favor, and she was deliriously happy with her new husband. Unlike many of her Hollywood peers, O'Hara was conservative and increasingly critical of the film industry. She had no trouble standing up to handsy directors or refusing provocative photo shoots in her heyday, but as time went on, the risky content of films bothered her more and more. Devoted to her marriage, she gradually withdrew from the screen, virtually retiring in the 1970s. Yet she remained busy. She co-managed a small airline with Blair in the Virgin Islands and became editor of a local magazine. Happiness, however, was fleeting. Disaster struck when Blair's plane suffered engine failure mid-flight, crashing and killing him along with 3 passengers. O'Hara was devastated beyond measure. But the challenges didn't end there. In the wake of her husband's death, she stepped into his shoes, becoming CEO and president of the airline they had built together, a role that demanded resilience and courage she had cultivated throughout her extraordinary life. Maureen O'Hara made history as the first woman president of a scheduled airline in the United States. But behind the trailblazing title, she was living a nightmare. Diagnosed with uterine cancer, she bravely underwent surgery and seemed on the path to recovery, only to be confronted with yet more heartbreak. Her closest friend, John Wayne, was also battling cancer, and his fight ended in loss. The combined tragedies of losing Blair and Wayne plunged O'Hara into a deep, years-long depression. In her grief, she began to suspect that her husband's plane crash was no accident. She believed Blair might have been involved with the CIA or some other government operation, perhaps even linked to thermonuclear missions, and feared the crash had been a deliberate attempt on his life. The discoveries terrified her so deeply that she eventually stopped investigating, concerned for her own safety. To this day, none of her claims have ever been confirmed. In 1989, a hurricane destroyed the home O'Hara had shared with her late husband in St. Croix. Though she considered rebuilding, a series of heart attacks forced her to slow down. She spent her later years in Glengariff, Ireland, before finally moving to Idaho to live with her grandson. There, she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 2015 at the age of 95, leaving behind a life marked by triumph, heartbreak, and resilience. Maureen O'Hara's story reminds us that fame, courage, and brilliance often come hand in hand with tragedy. Through every loss and every challenge, she endured, and her legacy continues to captivate and inspire.